Should you be buying second-year wide receiver Treylon Burks this offseason? All that and more this episode of Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. Check her out on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. Kate, first question. Should you be buying wide receiver Treylon Burks this offseason?
I think you should, especially in a full PPR format where, I mean, he's going to catch, I think, 90% of the targets there in
Seems
Tennessee,
low,
right? Like, it seems low because there are literally no other depth pieces. Now, here's the thing. It could backfire, right? Like, buying Treylon Burks could be a problem because then all of a sudden he's the only wide receiver in town. And that means he's going to have to fight a lot of heavy coverage. But like, dude is an amazing athlete, looks like a running back after the catch, like has an unbelievable combination of size and speed. Like all of the things are there for him to be able to have success. And I think what I like best about Treylon Burks is what he can do after the catch. So, you know, maybe that can be conducive to production, even if there's not a lot of coverage to deter away from him.
So this one's tricky for me because I think the answer depends a little bit on your league. So let's first talk about the player, right? Like I thought last year, Treylon Burks showed some flashes, and I think he had a touchdown against Philadelphia that was incredible, but he got hit in the head and got a concussion on that same play, and we didn't see him for several weeks after that, right? And I kind of feel like it took him almost like 2 months to kind of, get back to that level. And then we started to see a little bit more production down the stretch. So I think in year two, now that he knows the offense, now that he's there, he's healthy, I would not be surprised at a big leap. But when it comes to actually buying him, I think it depends, right? Let's first talk about his startup ADP, because his startup ADP is wide receiver 23, going ahead of guys like George Pickens, Brandon Ayuk, Terry McLaurin. That feels rich to me. Would you agree?
I actually feel like that sounds about right for me. We know what all of these players are, with the exception of George Pickens, who, again, I've said it. I've loved the flashes that we saw from George Pickens, but I have my concerns about the production level of Kenny Pickett. I have my concerns about the offense in general. Almost a little too flashy there on George Pickens, but like Brandon Ayuk and Terry McLaurin, I think they're some of the best wide receivers in the NFL, but do they have as high a ceiling as we know? I think we speculate Treylon Burks could have. I don't know. I think there's some untapped potential there, but again, it kind of comes down to what does this tennis, what direction is this team headed in? Because it does boast some similar questions to what's going on in Pittsburgh. Like, I don't really know the direction of this team.
Now the reason why,
worse.
And the reason why I mentioned the startup ADP is because I think you can actually get him in trades cheaper than you can draft him in startups. And I'll prove that to you. Here's some recent trades from Dynasty League Football. Okay, you just tell me really quickly which side you would rather have. Treylon Burks for the 109.
Treylon Burks.
Okay. Treylon Burks for the 111. Obviously,
Treylon Burks.
Treylon Burks. Treylon Burks for the 203.
Treylon Burks.
Right. Treylon Burks for Cam Akers.
Treylon Burks.
So this is kind of the point, right? Like you can get him here. Here's another one. Treylon Burks in 109 for pick 105.
I'll take Treylon Burks in
and that's the thing is, I think for me, if I'm doing a startup draft and I'm getting to wide receiver 21, 22, to me, I would take some of those other receivers like Christian Watson, Jordan Addison, maybe Terry McLaurin. I would take Brandon Ayuk over him. But if I'm trading for him and all of it costs me is a 4-round pick swap or 4-spot pick swap in the first round, I'm doing that all day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Treylon Burks, again, has a ton of potential. And if you're comparing him to some of the wide receivers, like, again, this 2023 class has some massive question marks in terms of size. Like, how productive are these? Like, we know these guys were incredibly talented wide receivers, but we also know that small stature, a small frame, that is a knock against you in the NFL. Maybe not, in terms of like your actual value to a team, but for fantasy, it does make you a bit of an outlier if you
Yeah.
are finally successful. So I prefer to take the shot on Treylon Burks, especially over some of these picks in, the late first this year, because
Yep.
I just think there's a better chance that he's going to hit. And I think he has, more of the physical tools, the more true wide receiver one alpha size.
Yes. I agree. I think this is a good opportunity for him. Maybe a little bit of the post hype breakout, right? He's on an offense that people don't think is very exciting, but he is the only receiver there. And I think Ryan Tannehill is going to start a lot of the season. I could be wrong. I think they want Will Levis to sit. I think Tannehill is going to play a bunch, and that's probably a good thing for Treylon Burks. Like Ryan Tannehill, say what you want about him, but functional, above average starting quarterback. And in that offense, I think he can certainly get him enough touches to make him very, very fantasy relevant this season. Okay, let's talk about some other second-year wide receivers and which one you're maybe the most excited about next. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious snack but don't want all of the sugar and the calories? Then you need to try the best tasting protein bar ever. It's Built Bar. You've got to try this. It's absolutely fantastic. It's healthy, but it tastes amazing. Seriously, you're not even going to know that they're healthy for you because they taste that good, because they are covered in 100% real dark chocolate. Yes, 100% real dark chocolate. And they come in so many unbelievably great flavors, including churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. Not sure how Built does it because they've made a protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar. Only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but a whopping 17 grams of protein. You absolutely cannot beat it. The best part is now you don't even have to wait to get your Built bars. You can still go to built.com, place your orders over there, pick up multiple boxes. But if you live near a Walmart, go to the pharmacy section, pick up a 4-bar box of some of the hit flavors, including cookies and cream, the double chocolate, or one that I'm starting to like a little bit more and more, the coconut puff. Or if you live close to a Sam's Club, like I happen to, run in, grab a 13-bar box with some of the hit flavors, including brownie patter puff and churro puff, and you can thank us later. Thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen of the day. Today, we are answering your mailbag questions. And this next one from Zeke, he wants to know, which second-year wide receiver are you the most excited about?
I'm going to pivot a little bit because we did talk about Christian Watson on last week's show, who I'm very excited about. It ranked 11th in terms of yards per reception. Really, from an analytics standpoint, kind of crushed it last year. Like I was very, generally speaking, skeptical of Christian Watson, how he'd translate, but ranked 4th in yards after the catch per reception. Performed exceedingly well in terms of yards per route run, which we know is a nice sticky metric. And, even in terms of passer rating, we're going to presume that's going to drop there with Jordan Love, but ranked 2nd in the NFL among wide receivers with 50 plus targets in terms of passer rating when targeted. I'm going to go ahead and just give a second shout out though. Let's talk about Jahan Dotson, who has been a bit of a darling this week on Twitter, thanks to Yahoo Sports' Matt Harmon, and his reception perception grade, because he charts out every single one of these wide receivers and their success rates against every route type you could imagine. And guess what? Jahan Dotson, pretty successful, but just all around against pretty much every single route that he's running, and found a lot of that success despite the fact that this was not an offense that you wanted to buy into at all.
No.
Just like looked better than I think even his stats would indicate here. Now he gets Sam Howell as the starting quarterback. That's what I'm kind of excited about because I loved Sam Howell's arm coming out of college. And this, I think, is an opportunity for maybe some of that connection to start to flourish a little bit. You have Terry McLaurin, you have a second year Jahan Dotson. Like this is, I think with Sam Howell, a better offense than it was last year.
I completely agree. All right, I just want to compare him to George Pickens, who is being drafted 8 spots higher in terms of the wide receiver rankings, a full round higher in startup leagues. Let's just compare this, right? Both receivers have a second-year quarterback throwing them the ball. Although I think Washington could potentially go to Jacoby Brissett. I don't think we're talking about that possibility enough, but it's whatever. Washington was a better offense last year than Pittsburgh. There's just no doubt, right? Jahan Dotson had the better draft capital, right? He was a first-round pick. He was a top 20 pick. Pickens was, I think, the 50th pick in the draft, right? Jahan Dotson, no injury concerns. We know that George Pickens has some coming out of Georgia. You mentioned the reception perception. Dotson graded out far better there. He can do all the routes. He was great against zone coverage, while George Pickens, 2 percentile zone coverage, which is a pretty bad sign for his prospects. I think people get really excited about the highlight plays that George Pickens makes, which is like really, really fun. And they're fun for us to talk about on Twitter, but those only represent, maybe 4 to 5 plays a season. I think Dotson's just a better player. And I get the quarterback concerns, but it's not like George Pickens doesn't have quarterback concerns either.
Yeah, I think that's right on the nose. I mean, Jahan Dotson and George Pickens, their stats actually aren't all that dissimilar from their rookie season, except Jahan Dotson, he performed similarly and, exceeded George Pickens in several areas. Yards after the catch production, excellent. They were kind of right on pace in terms of yards per route run. Where we really saw Jahan Dotson shine was his contested catch rate. 11 contested catches, and that was only on 56 targets throughout the year. Like, that's a lot of production, and tells you just kind of what he was working with, I think. But just a lot of untapped potential there, and I love the hype.
I've got one for you that I want to mention. I'm still a believer in Wan'Dale Robinson, who's being drafted as wide receiver 50 right now in startup leagues. Now, Wan'Dale struggled to stay healthy last year. Remember, he was hurt at the beginning of the year, hurt his hamstring, was inactive for 4 games, came back, played pretty well. He had a couple, 50-yard games and whatever. Final game before he got hurt and he was done for the season, 13 targets, 9 catches for 100 yards. I think this is somebody who, as long as he can stay healthy, is going to lead the Giants in targets. We know he's explosive after the catch. And again, you can get him for basically nothing right now. Wide receiver 50. Why not just gamble on him late in your startup leagues? Throw a 3rd or 4th round pick on a guy that very well could be the leading receiver in a Brian Daboll offense.
Yeah, I think it's fair. The Giants depth chart is just kind of a mess right now, right? Like Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, Paris Campbell, Jalen Hyatt, who I would project him to eke his way into the starting lineup. But
do you think in the slot or the outside? Because I just don't see him being a slot receiver.
I think you would.
He
probably
played the
be
slot
most
in college.
successful. I think he'd probably find the most success in the slot. But I also, I think Brian Daboll is also kind of creative enough that like you can probably use him on the outside despite some of those size concerns. And same for Wan'Dale Robinson. Like I think this offense can get creative enough, with these weapons. And, Darren Waller and his just stunning ability as a receiver is only going to open that up a bit further. Like it looks like kind of a mess, but when you're trying to pinpoint which of these guys might be especially effective, especially in like a PPR league, Wan'Dale Robinson
Yes.
feels like a nice value right now,
Because
particularly.
couldn't you see Wan'Dale just being the guy that gets 8 targets and 6 catches for 60 yards every week? And yes, it's not spectacular, but that's somebody, if you're in a deep PPR league and you're having to start 3 receivers and 3 flexes like I am in a couple of leagues, that's a great guy to just put on the bottom of your starting lineup and know that you're getting a solid base of production with the ceiling being a lot higher than that. So I think Wan'Dale is the guy. Again, it costs you absolutely nothing to go out and get him. Any interest in Skyy Moore, who's being drafted as wide receiver 57?
I'm having trouble with Skyy Moore here.
Yeah.
And I really did like Skyy Moore. I thought it was going to be a good fit with the Chiefs, but
They traded for Kadarius Toney. They drafted Rashee Rice, who they've already said, I've heard Brett Veach say they're going to play him in the slot to replace Juju. They have Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who is an outside receiver.
it feels like they just never latched on to Skyy Moore in his rookie season. And that's not to say that like we can't see some of that start to blossom, right? Like,
Yeah.
There's obviously a long ways to go in terms of figuring out where Skyy Moore fits, because I think the talent was there. But, in terms of like the moves this team has made, the comments they've made, it feels like they are not eager to get Skyy Moore involved. I feel like some of, he had some slight struggles on special teams. Like, I feel like all of that kind of added up into maybe he needs a fresh start somewhere else. And then I'd buy in.
Yeah. All right. Let's answer one more question about Tua and his value in Superflex leagues when we get back. All right, Kate, we are answering your Twitter questions. This last one is here from, I lost the name really quick. It's at the Dynasty DGen. He wants to know, what are we doing with Tua? He would surely be a fringe first-round startup pick in Superflex leagues if not for the concussion issues. He's young. He has draft capital attached to amazing receivers. He's a third-rounder in reality. What is the right way to hedge this one? So, really quickly, I want to mention his value. Right now in startup leagues, he's being drafted as QB 13, just ahead of Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, and Daniel Jones. A couple of things on his numbers last year. Started 13 games, led the NFL in 7 different categories: touchdown percentage, yards per attempt, adjusted yards per attempt, yards per completion, passer rating, net yards per attempt, and adjusted net yards per attempt. What are you doing here?
I think I'm buying him at cost. Like, I don't really think there's a ton of question marks here, for me, at least. Like, the thing that you have to consider, right, is the medical reports. Like, yes, it was a very ugly and dire situation for Tua last year. And it felt like that might have been the last time we ever saw him on a football field. If he gets another concussion, obviously, like that wouldn't be good for his long-term projections.
Yeah, I think it's probably it, unfortunately.
I think that would probably be it. But also, you can't predict injuries. And the general medical consensus, based on the reports we've seen out of the organization, based on what Tua has said himself in terms of the medical advice he's been given, is that he's not more prone to concussions because of his concussion history. Was it just some really crappy bad luck in 2022? Maybe. And, I think the fact that we still have this offense with Tyreek Hill, with Jalen Waddle, it feels like there's enough upside here to still buy into him at QB 13, given the production, given the surrounding cast. Like, this is an offense that I think is going to have a lot of scoring opportunities as long as Tua's on the field. I like him at QB 13, and I know there's a risk, but you know what, Marcus? There is a risk with every single player,
Sure.
Regardless of who it is, regardless of who you're drafting. Kyler Murray going just ahead of him, QB 11, and I'd rather have Tua there. Like,
Here's my thoughts on this. I don't think I am actively going out and trying to trade for Tua right now. If he becomes a part of a deal or somebody comes and offers me Tua at a discounted price, that's when I'm interested. But I don't think I'm making it a priority of mine to be like, you know what, this offseason, I'm going to go get Tua in as many leagues as possible. In fact, if I can flip him for one of these young quarterbacks like a Bryce Young or an Anthony Richardson, or even maybe a Jordan Love, I'm probably doing that just to get a little bit safer. Because I do like him. Like any game that he starts and he's healthy, he's going to put up QB1 numbers because of the wide receivers. But there is a lot of risk there that I'm probably just not looking to add to my dynasty teams.
I think that's a super, super fair assessment. Like, if he happens upon you, like if you notice he's falling in your startups, like I think where he's going, like in a super flex draft, maybe, second to third round, that feels about right.
Like if he's being drafted as like he's available as QB 16, QB 17, that's where I'm jumping in, right? But I don't know if I can pick him a lot higher than that either.
And I think this also comes back to a question about like, what is the state of your franchise, right? Like, are you in a win now situation? Because if I've got a team that's ready to contend this season, that's the team that I am willing to at least be a little bit more aggressive onto it, because if he puts up even one season of production like he was last year, then it's going to be worth it. But if you're looking, if you're in a rebuild, he's a clear sell. And I think that's where you have to start to take into consideration how you're building your team and what are your goals this year.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you guys for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Every day, we're going to start doing these mailbags every Friday for the offseason because not a lot's going on, but this is a good time to answer your questions. So please make sure that you send them to us, either to me at Marcus_Mosher, or Kate at Kate Magjuk. Check out the YouTube channel. It's free. We put up content every single day over there, Locked On Dynasty. Again, go follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Dynasty. Enjoy your weekend. And Kate, you and I will be right back here on Monday to talk more about Dynasty football. We'll see you guys then.